Good afternoon. Today we are doing Mishnah 11, and this Mishnah is authored by Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa. Put the Mishnah up first, and then I will tell you a little bit. Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa is a very fascinating figure. Um, so there's actually two parts. A number of things that he said are going to be in the coming up Mishnahs. In this one, Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa Omer. So Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa said, Kol sheyiras cheto kodemes lechachmaso. Anyone whose fear of sin precedes his wisdom, chachmaso miskayemes, his wisdom will endure. But v'chol shechachmaso kodemes yiras cheto, but if his wisdom precedes his fear of sin, ein chachmaso miskayemes, his wisdom will not endure. Okay, before we actually get into anything about the thought that he's presenting, just maybe a little bit about Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa himself, who there are many stories brought down in the Talmud about him and call them miracles or other things that he was able to do. He was a very pious individual. The Gemara relates a story where he was a student of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who, if you recall, in the previous chapter, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 students, each of which had various qualities that were discussed in the Mishnah, and each one presented what was the best way a person should choose to do, and what was the worst way. He was not listed as one of the 5, but he was a sort of like a student and a colleague of Rabbi Yochanan ben Dosa, of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And one time he was going to study Torah, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's son was ill. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa to pray for his son, and because it looked like he was going to die, and so it says that he placed his head between his knees, and he was meditating, and he prayed, and the son was healed. So then Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said that if I had done that myself, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, remember, was one of the greatest, he says, if I had done that, it wouldn't have worked. Hashem wouldn't have listened. But when he did it, it worked. So his wife, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, said, well, is he greater than you? Like, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, you're so great. Is he really greater than you? He said, no, he's not greater than me. The difference is that he is like a servant of God, that when you're a servant in the palace, you can come in and out anytime. So in a sense, you have access to the king. Whereas me, I'm like a minister. I only can come in when I'm invited. So I don't have that same closeness. In other words, Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa was viewed as someone who was so close to Hashem. So if you wanted to ask him something, he could ask him for favors, so to speak. So there were numerous stories of him praying for sick people. And there was another story with Rabbi Gamliel's son. A lot of the sons of many of the leading sages seems to got ill, and at different times. And he when he saw them coming, somehow he knew what they were doing, and he went upstairs to pray. And when he said, "Okay, don't worry, that he's been healed." And they asked, like, "How do you know? How do you know he's been healed?" So he said, "I have a tradition that if when I'm praying, my prayers go smoothly, then I know they were received. If my prayers are not smooth, then they weren't received." Sometimes when we're davening or sometimes we're tripping over our words, it's not a good sign. If we're able to say the words smoothly when we're praying, that's a good sign that our prayers are seem to be more acceptable. But if we're having trouble even saying the words, and not because we don't know how to, but sometimes you have a rough day, right, or something like that, that might be a sign. So he said, when my prayer goes smoothly, then I know they were accepted. And if not, then I know they weren't accepted. And they made a note of what time it was, and they went back to the house of Ram Gamliel, and sure enough, he was healed. And they said, what time did he take that turn? And whatever, maybe he was in a coma, I don't know exactly what. And they turned out it was the exact time that Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa said. So he had this ability. Maybe one more story, which I think is also worthy of mentioning, is if this is maybe one of the most famous ones, which is Rabbi they were very poor. They were extremely poor, and they lived on very little. And one time they didn't even have money to light the Shabbos candles with right. And his daughter was lighting candles, and she ended up using vinegar instead of oil. And it could be it was a mistake. Anyway, she had used vinegar instead of oil, and she was very upset. And she comes to him and she says, "Oh, I used the vinegar." And he said, "Big deal. What difference does it make? If God decided that oil should burn, he can decide vinegar should burn. It's all a miracle, right?" And so there's a couple of lessons here. One is just the idea that um, he had that faith, and somehow God listened to him. But the other is that when we talk about miracles, right, we always have a tendency to think, oh, it's that big thing that happened. And really we lose sight of the fact that just what we call nature, that's the biggest miracle. That things we think that is normal for oil to burn. Who decided oil should burn? Why does water put out a fire? And by the way, I just heard that don't throw water on an oil fire, right? But if you we actually once had that happen, by the way, where the candles, and it was in shul where we had a Friday night dinner, and the oil from the candles created a fire, and throwing water on it made it worse. You're not supposed to pour water on an oil fire. But the idea is though that it's a miracle. Whatever that the fact that oil burns is not normal. It's God decided it. He could decide vinegar could burn just as easily, and therefore Rabbi Hanina Mendoza was able to say, you know what, if Hashem wants it to happen, He's going to make it happen. And in that case, He did. Okay, just a couple of things about the actual Mishnah for today. We'll finish the rest tomorrow. It said that anything that yiras chet, the idea of fear of sin. What is fear of sin? So Rashi points out, fear of sin means that you are so concerned you don't want to do a sin that you distance yourself. You make sure that you don't go near things that are going to cause you to sin. Something that's prohibited, you distance yourself from it. And it's not just a matter of oh, you know what, I don't want to sin, but you actually actively do something to avoid it, right? Because you know that it's possible. So don't put yourself in situations where something could happen that you're going to end up sinning. Don't put yourself too close to some thing where you might be tempted, or we know the example of lashon hara, right? Don't get into the middle of a crowd that are talking about other people. You're asking for it. You're gonna automatically get sucked into the conversation, right? So avoid those issues. That's how Rashi understands it. Rabbi Yonah points out that it's also two different ways of understanding, but one is a person puts in an effort, and when you're trying to learn things, why are you doing it? If a person is striving to attain wisdom in order to be able to know how to protect himself from sin, if your goal is to be able to know, I want to be able to learn how to do the right thing, I want to be able to know how to avoid doing the wrong thing, so that's the type of wisdom, that's the type of knowledge that will endure. Because as a result of it, you're going to, first of all, you'll avoid sin because now you'll know what to do. And as you learn what you're supposed to do, you will act on it if that's your goal. But if your goal is not in order to do it, but just I like the intellectual understanding. So eventually a person could come to view and especially the law part of it, as a burden that he's not going to end up doing it. Like, after all, I want to go and whatever. I want to eat cheeseburgers. And then all of a sudden I'm in my learning, I see, oh, whoa, that's prohibited. And I start learning all these things that are telling me I can't do all those things I enjoy doing. Then I don't want to learn anymore. Like I don't want to know it, right? So it becomes that if your goal is merely for the intellectual knowledge, and it's going to be going against what you're doing anyway, and you don't want to change, then the learning will become a burden for you. But if the goal is to be able to learn in order to do, I want to learn what I should do and what I shouldn't do. So then it means you're open to changing, you're open to improvement, and then the learning itself will endure. And that's the difference between what's your motivation in why you are learning it. And we'll hold it there for today. Tomorrow we'll finish the rest of it. Have a great day, everyone.